Well, hello, and welcome to Cinema Chat. This is the podcast where you talk about the movies and the people that made them. And today, I am going to be talking with our good podcast friend, April VeVea. How are you, April?
I'm doing well, David. How are you?
I'm great. And yes, and let me introduce myself. I am your humble host, David Heath. So we are going to talk about Thelma Todd. I reached out to you a while back and asked you if you felt comfortable talking about Thelma, and you had said you had known a little bit about her. What's your extended knowledge on Thelma Todd?
Um, I would say, now, of course, the main thing with Thelma Todd is everyone focuses on her death.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's always a fun thing to talk about. But, I mean, I enjoy Thelma's films and stuff like that, and she had an interesting life before her untimely demise.
Yeah, she did, and she starred with some really big time people. Her list, I mean, on several Laurel and Hardy films, a pair of Laurel, sorry, the Marx Brothers. She was on the screen with Clara Bow a couple of times. She was on the screen with Charlie Chase, Buster Keaton, and lots of shorts with Zazu Pitts and some shorts with Patsy Kelly. That's a long list.
Yeah, most definitely. And of course, she did some Wheeler and Woolsey films,
That's
which were
right.
very popular for RKO as well. But yeah, I think her shorts with Zazu and Patsy are definitely the best.
Yeah. Oh, you do. Okay. Yeah. They are. They're very funny. It's almost like I feel like those two um, uh, were and when she was teamed with Patsy Kelly too, but I think that those two, particularly Zazu, I feel like they were the female Laurel and Hardy, only smarter.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It's interesting to see how Thelma's character, morphs between Zazu and Patsy.
Yeah, yeah, and that's true. You're absolutely right. I think because one is different from the other. I'm talking about the difference between Zazu and Patsy Kelly, and I think that there were just adjustments made to scripting and of course Thelma's nickname. One of her nicknames was the Ice Cream Blonde, and the other nickname was Hot Toddy, which I don't know if you know this, April, but I'm almost 100% sure that Groucho Marx, after starring with Thelma Todd in a couple of movies, is in another one, and forgive me, I'm trying to remember which one it is. But he says to Chico, he says, if I, I could be by the fire enjoying a hot toddy right now, but instead I'm here with you. I don't know if you knew that. Which one line I'm talking about? I was trying to think of what movie that was, but I know he says I could be enjoying a hot toddy, but instead I'm here with you. And he's in the cold rain, which is why with Chico Marx instead of with a hot toddy, and the inference is that he's talking about a drink, but in reality, I'm pretty sure he was referring to Thelma Todd.
Yeah, probably. And interestingly, I don't know if you knew this, David, but Thelma actually hated the nickname Hot Toddy.
No, I didn't, but I actually understand that because I do know that she wasn't real. I mean, she knew she was beautiful, but she didn't want to be known as this beautiful star. Instead, she wanted to be, an actress and known. And I think there was a quote about her saying something about building on beauty is not the right way to go, which is the kind of the opposite of the two actresses we've discussed in the past with Marilyn and Jane Mansfield. We talked about them, and they did build on their beauty, and Thelma Todd did not do that. Instead, she tried to come at a more legitimate way.
Yeah, most definitely. She wasn't somebody who was going to sit there and use her looks to, make herself famous. She wanted to be
Mm-hmm.
known as a decent actress, which, you know, Marilyn and Jane would say that, but then they would kind of revert back to doing these, over-sexualized roles. And I know Marilyn fans are going to be mad that I said that, but I mean, that's basically what she's doing in Something's Got to Give. She's, back to posing nude, and she's, relying on that kind of sex symbol thing. So Thelma, I think, just wanted to sit there. She wanted to act. She wanted to, be a good comedian, a good dramatic actress, and she did very well.
Yeah, and I think that when you talk about actresses like Marilyn, I think you're talking about somebody when they rely on their looks. When it's your absolute best asset, it's hard to not go to it. It's kind of like needing money. And realizing you got this huge savings account, but you promised yourself you weren't going to tap into that savings account, but there you are because you got to pay a bill getting into that savings account, and you tap into it, and you've told yourself, you promised yourself, made bargains with yourself, said, I'm not going to do it, but then you got a bill to pay, and then so you go get from that savings account. And I think that's a similar thing with Marilyn, whereas with Thelma Todd, for better or for worse, I mean, she certainly didn't have the career that Marilyn had, but she went at it a different way. There's no question about that. I don't know if you were aware. Do you know anything about her contract with Hal Roach regarding her weight?
Yeah, so Thelma was known to easily put on weight, and that had actually started back when she went to the Paramount School. Paramount, for a brief time, had an actors' college in New York. Mm-hmm. And if you got into the actors' college, if you graduated, you would get a film contract with Paramount. Mm-hmm. And Thelma was one of the people who got in. I think it only lasted for one semester, if I remember correctly, or one, mm-hmm. Group of students, I should say. Mm-hmm. But she was told at the Paramount School, you're really going to need to watch your weight because you put on weight easily. And of course, Hal Roach noticed that as well, and put in a clause that she had to watch her weight.
Right. I speculated in the past about Hal Roach, and maybe he wasn't the nicest guy out there.
I tend to compare Hal Roach to the rest of, the studio heads you saw. At the end of the day, they're running a business.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're not really caring about feelings. They're caring about the bottom line.
Yeah,
Hal Roach made some really great stuff, but he definitely could be cruel to people as well.
No, though I think you brought up an excellent point. I think he wanted everyone to think that he was a really super nice guy. I know when he lived to be 101 years old, I think 101, and he certainly hit triple digits. But I think he was 101 when he died, and I remember him here on an interview way back in 1989 on the radio. I heard him on the radio with another gentleman, and I don't remember his name, but Hal Roach seemed like this nice old guy, and I've heard some pretty rotten things about him though. But he certainly tried to screw Laurel and Hardy over that movie. I don't know if you saw Stan and Ollie, but Hal Roach, purposely kept Laurel and Hardy's contracts separate, so that way one would expire before the other, and leave Stan out in the cold while Oliver Hardy, and of course he left Oliver Hardy out there, and had to force him to make a movie to finalize a contract and break up the group for a minute. But I kind of wonder, and I guess that she had to weigh 121 pounds, which is an odd number. Not 120, but not 125, but 121. And it's kind of like putting a speed limit sign, speed limit 24. I mean, why don't you just make it even 25? But now here's another comparison. I don't think I don't think that Thelma Todd I don't think she compares to Marilyn or Jane Mansfield like she compares to Jean Harlow. I think that their careers were certainly parallel in as far as timelines, And they were parallel, and they both started with Hal Roach. But what do you think made Jean Harlow make it as a total superstar, and Thelma Todd be kind of kept down, because they are fairly similar? What do you think?
You know, this is going to seem like kind of a cop out, but I do think some of it just came down to age.
Mm-hmm.
Because, Jean's 6 years younger than Thelma.
Sure.
And I think that's always a big thing. They could start, going with Jean when, Jean's like 18 years old. But as far as like screen presence, I think that Thelma is one of those people who was just kind of made for these like slapstick comedies, whereas Jean is somebody who was made more so for these kind of vampy roles. Not saying that Jean relied on her appearance or anything like that, but I do think that Jean was much more sensual, I guess you could say, than Thelma. Whereas Thelma kind of reminds me of Joan Blondell, a little like body and stuff like that.
Oh, that's a good comparison too. I think that you got something there, and I think when Jean Harlow was on the screen, she owned it, and she was smoldering in even though I'd sit there, there's no way to quantify it, but just looks alone, if you just see a pretty picture of them, not trying to look like a supermodel, I think Thelma Todd's just a little prettier, but there's something about Jean Harlow that she kind of replaced Clara Bow, and what basically became the it girl, and she was starring with Clark Gable, somehow Thelma Todd got stuck in this cycle of being the fourth or fifth banana in films, to the Marx Brothers and people like that. And I think that's probably why you say you like. What is it you like about the short films with Zazu Pitts?
I think with Zazu, they have like a good working chemistry. Of course, Zazu's a little neurotic, and just kind of, neurotic's probably not the right word, but you know what I mean. She's kind of just in her own world.
Yes.
And Thelma is kind of playing the line between straight and funny. And then, of course, when you go over with Patsy Kelly, Thelma turns more into like the comedic dumb blonde. And I think they're enjoyable, light, fluffy movies. Are they something I'm going to watch all the time? No. But if I need like a 30-minute pick-me-up, they're perfect.
You know what? I feel the same way. I enjoy anytime I have 30 minutes. I'm waiting at home for somebody, or waiting home to leave. I got 30 minutes. I want to sit down and watch an old short film. I enjoy doing that. Incidentally, I should ask you, I've asked lots of people on this podcast before, but are you like me, where you're equally horrified as you are joyful that films can be viewed on YouTube and other streaming, just that easily? I mean, I talked with Harold Lloyd's granddaughter, and she said that her grandfather would be so upset that people were watching his films on YouTube. What do you think about that whole concept?
I have to look at it like changing technologies. I think now, for starters, some of this stuff really isn't easily accessible for people. And we're finding more and more, like 16, 17-year-old fans who can't go and buy, the $65 short set.
Right.
So I'm happy from that standpoint. I'm happy that a lot of stars are getting more recognition than they would. Like, I see people now who talk about Una Merkel, and I didn't see people talking about Una Merkel when I was, first online 20 years ago. Boy, I feel old. But you know what I mean. It's one of those things. It's exposing younger audiences and older audiences who might have missed stuff, exposing people of all ages to these stars. So from that standpoint, I support it. On the flip side, this stuff was made for the big screen, and there's nothing like seeing a classic film on the big screen.
Right. And see, that's my point. And the problem is we just don't have those kind of opportunities. So that's why whenever I say I'm joyful but yet horrified at the same time that we can access these films so easily, and you pop on YouTube, and you're probably not as big of a silent film fan as I am. I don't know if you are or not, but I enjoy watching silent films, and when I do, I turn off all the lights, and I don't pay attention to anything other than the film that's on the screen, and I hope against hope that it's the right soundtrack or even somewhere close to it. You never really know, but back to Thelma Todd. Let me ask you, what do we know about her childhood, or if any?
So we actually know a fair amount about her childhood. She was born in Lawrence, Massachusetts, to an upholsterer named John Shawtaw and his wife, Alice Elizabeth Edwards. She had an older brother named William. William was 3 years older than her, if I remember correctly. And then, unfortunately, when William was 7 or 8, he was playing in a creamery, and Thelma was there as well while the family was vacationing in Vermont. And a part in the creamery machine exploded. He got hit, and he passed away instantly. So, but the Todds were, like a moderately successful family. They weren't, sitting there begging for table scraps or anything like that. So she had I would say, like a lower middle class to middle class family, although I know her dad did have a small foray into politics, so I would say that they had kind of a roller coaster upbringing, if that makes sense.
No, it does. That's terrible about her brother. And she only had the one brother, no other siblings.
No other
Yeah,
siblings,
and that's
which, of course,
yeah.
I think that's part of the reason that Thelma's death affected her mom so much. I mean, when you was a child, it's horrible. I'm not saying it like that, but I mean, Thelma was her last child. Alice had to see both of her children pass away.
Yeah, it's got to be difficult.
Yeah, most definitely. I can't imagine. Thelma actually had wanted to become a school teacher, and she enrolled at the Lau Normal School. Don't ask me about the name, but today it's the University of Massachusetts, Lau. Sorry, David, my son just went past me.
Didn't even hear it.
Anyway, University of Massachusetts, she went there after graduating, but her mom sat there and said, you need to keep entering beauty pageants, you're just such a beautiful girl, you can make it. And Thelma actually eventually became Miss Massachusetts of 1925, so.
Yeah, and that's how she wrote her ticket, right?
Yeah, that's actually how she got recommended to go to the Paramount Film School. Was because of winning Miss Massachusetts. So she got, her Paramount contract, and the films they made were absolutely horrible. They had everyone who had graduated the film school in them. I've actually never even seen one of them. I've just read the reviews. But they were supposedly, pretty bad. So 1931, a couple years after she's graduated from the film school, she actually signed on with Hal Roach, and of course that became a whole other thing. Yeah,
and it's like that's why I was talking about a minute ago. She signed with Hal Roach, and then eventually she went back and did some Paramount films, and she did. Let's see. She also, Thelma Todd had range. She had range. I mean, you look at her IMDb, and it's all over the place. I mean, she's.
Yeah. And you have to think she's only working for 9 years, and she's in over 100 films in those 9 years.
Yeah. I mean, that's more than Charlie Chaplin over a period of what 52 years, and it's crazy. It's crazy. Just an amazing career. But she was in the 1931 Maltese Falcon, and she was in a movie called House of Horror. She was in a couple of pre-code comedies that were a little over the top, and she was in a couple of dramas like Corsair. Just she was all over the place, and I think she's probably capable of doing just about anything. But she had trouble getting that leading lady role. Do you think that it's possible that there was a casting couch situation there where she was getting shut out from the big roles, or do you think it's just like what we were talking about? Maybe she just didn't command a screen the same way that the Jean Harlows did.
I think that's a great question, and I think there's probably a little bit of people are just kind of looking at her and thinking she's not, made to be in an A-list picture, leading a picture. And to be honest with you, I don't know if she could have led a picture strictly by herself. The other thing too is she kind of comes in at a transition time. And she's also, like I said before, she's competing a lot really with the likes of, Joan Blondell. And like you said, on the other side of the spectrum, it's Jean Harlow. So I think Thelma probably with her comedic shorts was right where she was supposed to be. Mm-hmm. It kind of reminds me of Thelma Ritter. As much as I love Thelma Ritter couldn't really have led a film.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, but when she chimed in the film, it was always at the perfect time with perfect timing.
Yeah, most definitely, and I that's how I kind of look at Thelma Todd. She's a younger version of Thelma Ritter.
Prettier version too, but
just a bit.
But that's a really good analogy. I hadn't thought of that. She certainly had a flair for comedy. Talking about Thelma Todd, and I think particularly slapstick comedy, mild slapstick, not over the top, but mild slapstick. She had tons of scenes where she was involved with pie, throwing pies and stuff. And we all have our opinions about throwing pies, but in a pinch, it's really funny. So it's kind of predictable now, but at the time, it really wasn't.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And I think you have to look at her contemporaries, because I would say she was up there with, like Wooler and Wilsey and, Laurel and Hardy. Not in a remembrance standpoint, but for the era. I mean, she is part of, these very successful female duos.
Yeah, and I think that one of the reasons why, my own speculation as to why she wasn't that leading lady, in an A film was probably because she was so darn sassy and kind of independent thinking, where like in her films, she would would have different types of responses to certainly like when she's dancing with Groucho Marx. I don't know. She's clearly the and I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going with this. But she's deep. Seems like she seems different, and I think that her flair for comedy kind of keeps her. And I know Jean Harlow was sassy too, very sassy. But it was a different kind of sass. I don't know if I'm getting my point across very well.
No, I get exactly what you're saying. Jean is sassy, but she still kind of has this sexual sassiness.
Yeah.
And whereas Thelma is just pure funny sass, it's a totally different thing. And I think if you're watching them, you realize, and this isn't a dig towards Jean Harlow. Jean can hold her own as well, but Thelma can really hold her own.
Yeah, and I think say for example, I don't know if you've seen the film Call Her Savage with Clara Bow. Have you seen that?
I have.
Oh yeah. The fight scene between those two, it would if you throw Jean Harlow in the role, it's not quite the same. Jean Harlow was more like I'm going to insult the man that I'm falling for, and so I can appear stronger, but really I'm melting. And whereas Thelma Todd doesn't melt.
Exactly. That's a perfect way to describe it.
Yeah.
She's not melting at all. She's not going to, fall back on her sexuality. She's going to be there tit for tat, just verbally.
Yeah, and she definitely did tit for tat in a few scenes, and certainly in the Call Her Savage scene. I have mixed feelings about Call Her Savage. By the way, I there's part of me that really really adores that film, and there's part of me that says that script really could be better, and it's hard sometimes to watch Clara Bow in a sound film because I know that she hated being in sound films. But anyway, but yeah, I mean, I haven't seen the 1931 Maltese Falcon. Have you seen that?
I actually have not seen that one.
Yeah, I wonder, I feel like I should have researched it. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know until yesterday that she was in it. I'm like studying her IMDb, and I'm going, wait a minute, she was in the Maltese Falcon in 1931. I'm like, what? That does not have the same reputation as the 41 one, but still, that's seemed rather crazy. You find out things sometimes, and now ultimately, we've talked about Cal Roach a couple of times. Is it possible that being in so many short films, and like she was, where she headlined them, and some where she was with the boys, is it possible that being in that many and being that exposed to so many short films that you just develop that reputation, and then you're not going to get that nod as an A-list actress? You think that might have something to do with it as well?
Yeah, I think pigeonholing is always an issue when it comes to actors and actresses in Hollywood. So I think that's a fair assessment. There's not a whole lot of people who transition from shorts into serious film acting that had headlined the shorts. And I shouldn't say serious film acting, but you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
To like headlining major 1930s blockbusters. There's not a whole lot who transitioned from that. So I think that's a fair thing. And I also think we have to kind of look at and realize there's two separate markets. There's the shorts market, and then there's the full-length picture market.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Yeah. So I think Thelma, basically, I guess the best way that I would describe shorts is that they were like 1930s television.
Oh, that's.
You could sit there, you could go catch, a new episode, you can say, and the season, obviously lasts however long comedy pairs together. But you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
You can sit there and you could go and watch them, and you knew who they were, you knew like what you were going to get into, you knew that they were going to get into some kind of hijinks together, but it would all be resolved usually happily at the end. And so I would say Thelma Todd was basically like a TV star.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I also liked the analogy that you made earlier, and oh gosh, Joan Blondell. I blanked for 1 second. I think that she might have, Joan Blondell had an extremely long career, lasting, just off the top of my head, not looking at IMDb. She had a career that went 50 years, and a little longer than 50 years, which is one of the longer ones. By the way, if you're keeping score yourself, then you would know Lillian Gish actually, I think, has the absolute record where I don't think anyone's going to touch it. 75-year career between her first film and her last film, where she starred in each one. She didn't star in all of her films, but she starred in the first one and starred in the last one with Betty Davis in 1987. I don't know if you knew that, but just a bit of trivia: 75-year career between films and between starring roles. Is that crazy? Right? Is that crazy?
Yeah, that's absolutely
Yeah, who
crazy.
touches that? I've looked and I've researched and researched, seen lots of people with 70-year careers, not 75, and even the ones with 70 years didn't touch the. I mean, they weren't starring roles, and maybe they did one, maybe they did 10 B films where they were the star in the 40s or something. But no, it's crazy. We keep getting off track, but it's sometimes it's fun to get off track.
It can be, especially being all these women are interesting.
Yeah, there's a tie into each one. The film industry is like a thread. One leads right into the other. Clara Bow led to Jean Harlow, which eventually led to Marilyn, which led to Jane Mansfield, which led to Brigitte Bardot. And then it kind of changed a little bit where the women didn't own the industry anymore. Which is a subject actually that you know what, this is one diversion that I did want to get with you on, and I want to know what your feeling is. I had a conversation with somebody just yesterday when I was talking about doing this podcast, and my question is this: is why is it that women? How did the women lose the film industry? Like, why did all of a sudden men were the big star? Certainly Clark Gable, Cary Grant, Jimmy Stewart. They were, going down to John Wayne, and those guys. They certainly owned owned their films. But you going back to the early days, for the most part, women ruled. What do you think happened there?
It's funny because I think as you see women get kicked out of executive roles in the film industry, you see more women on screen. And as women, begin to equalize themselves in the film industry, you see more men on screen.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of it is we've kind of veered away from these really, I'm trying to think how to word this because I really love classic films, but we go away from these women who are portraying characters, mm-hmm. and they're almost always the same characters in every film, and it goes the same for men too. Mm-hmm. But if you go to a Rita Hayworth movie, if you're going to watch one today, you know that there's like a 90% chance there's going to be at least one dance number in it.
Oh, yeah.
And you know that Rita is going to have, this kind of feline grace in it. Mm-hmm. You watch a Betty Grable movie, there are obviously a few exceptions, but for the most part, if you watch a Betty Grable movie, you are going to get like this kind of tough all-American girl with a heart of gold, and there will be at least one dance number. Mm-hmm. If you go to an Ava Gardner movie, you're going to get like this, dark, sensual femme fatale. Go to a Lana Turner movie, you know that you are going to get this light blonde femme fatale. So I think it's more so that Hollywood went away from, making these people continuously play the same role. Mm-hmm. And, there's something about, I think people just like going to see women. And not just men, I think, women do too, but Hollywood has changed what it puts out. There's not a whole lot of, female rom-coms in the 1950s, but then if you look in the 90s, there's a ton.
Right. No, it's all good points. And just as a preview, I'm going to put it out there that in a few months, I'm going to do a podcast. This is just kind of a spoiler that I'm going to do one about Claudia Cardinelli and Brigitte Bardot, and I'm going to talk about this subject in great detail. So be watching for that. I may want your input, April. What do you think?
Hey, I'm always happy to talk about Brigitte.
Yeah, I figured that might be one of your good subjects too. So let's go back to Thelma Todd, and she had some trouble. Why is it every time you and I talk, we talk about actresses that had horrible love lives?
It's just a blonde thing.
Yeah, it seems to be. She had marriage with Ted DeSico, and I think I'm saying his name right. And I don't know if you know this, but her marriage was really horrible. But she probably knew that. But did you know she left him $1 in her will? Did you know?
I did know that.
$1.
Here's $1 whole. That though was kind of a thing because there's a few other stars who did that too. Like Valentino left Natasha $1.
So was this a thing back then? I didn't know that.
I guess I think it's kind of like supposedly when you tip a waitress a penny, it's supposed to be like the ultimate slap in the face.
Yeah,
I've never done it, so I can't say anything from experience. But
Thelma Todd just says, Ted, this is what I think you're worth.
Yeah, no. And after she and Pat got divorced, Ted also goes by Pat. Most people might know him as Pat. But after she goes and leaves Pat, they do have kind of an odd friendship with each other, and they play around with the idea of reconciliation, but they're never ever like actually going to reconcile with each other. She and Pat just have an odd relationship.
Yeah, and then of course she had a relationship with the film director Roland West, which he was married, and so this was a problem, a real big problem, and which dovetails into what everybody always talks about when they talk about Thelma Todd. Talk to me about scenarios. Why did Thelma Todd die?
Okay, first off, I just have to say, and I had nothing to do with it, so this isn't like a self-plug, but there's a very excellent book called A Testimony of a Death, The Death of Thelma Todd, that everybody should read. It's 300 pages or so on Thelma Todd's death.
Yeah.
So there are three scenarios that come up. One is that it was just an accident of circumstance. One is that it's a suicide, and one is that it is murder. I've seen a lot of people go with the murder theory, and they think that Lucky Luciano had her killed, and that Lucky was there, even though Lucky was actually across the country, and there's no proof that the two of them even met. So that one's always fun. And then the one, I don't think Thelma was suicidal. I really don't. I tend to lean towards accidental. I think that Roland locked her out of the house because he was mad that she was out late. She, probably, because, she was drunk. So, and people tend to overlook that. And I think she just turned on the car thinking, I'll be warm and everything, until Roland, calms down a little bit. She probably fell asleep and she died.
Yeah. And now my question is why didn't she have a broken nose and bruised ribs or broken ribs or something?
So she had, I haven't heard about bruised ribs. She did have a slight, her nose had a little bit of blood coming out, and she had a cap tooth that came out that people tried to say was proof of something. But she had just gotten dental work like the day before where they had put in the cap. So, and it's 1930s dentistry.
Yeah.
So what the most likely scenario is with the nose and the cap on her tooth is that when she fell over, she hit the steering wheel and it, hurt her nose and made the cap fall out.
Yeah.
And that would also explain, the little bit of blood they found. So.
Right.
But people act like she was completely beaten, and that her face was all swelled up and everything and stuff like that, and that's just not the case.
Okay, well, yeah, I've heard so many things, and I feel like this, yeah, I feel like this is something that so few people really have authority on, and it's a 85-year-old case. So I'm not sure, and it's still an open case. But I think you're probably right. If and even if she did have those injuries, or even if she was really badly injured, it could account for even more for her to someone hurt her but didn't kill her, but she indeed got in her car. And I don't know. I don't know why anyone would beat somebody up and then give them carbon monoxide poisoning. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and I don't think so either. And I just want to point out, like, her organs are all bright red, which is a sign of carbon monoxide poisoning.
Uh-huh.
So we know that she died of carbon monoxide poisoning.
Right, yeah.
And that's the thing with it. And I've heard that theory too, that somebody beat her up, like Lucky Luciano beat her up, and then they put her in the car so that it would look like carbon monoxide poisoning, and it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, you just don't beat somebody up, and then because then you're that puts everything in question.
Well, and there's then a bunch of other issues with that too. How did they get the garage door closed to get everything without leaving any trace of it? And there's just a bunch of issues with it. And I've heard all the people who go, oh, well, the engine has stopped running, but there was still gas in the tank. And what just happened with the car is there was a mechanical error in the car, apparently. The testimony of a death explains it better than I can. But their thing is, they have some car expert in that book, and it's just oh yeah, these cars will shut off after running for 3 hours. To me, honestly, I think the biggest thing is that they didn't actually find her for 24 hours.
Right.
But I also think that was probably more that Roland West was mad at her and wasn't going to go look for her, because Roland and Thelma would fight quite often about, one, how late she would stay out, and two, how much she would drink.
Right.
And Thelma was known, if she would get mad at Roland, that she would go to her mom's house for a little bit, and that she'd come back to Roland in a day or two.
Roland was insanely jealous, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was also insanely jealous.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And
but I don't think she was particularly down. There's another thing people will complain about, her blood alcohol content, and then they'll sit there and say, well, Ida Lupino said that she really didn't see Thelma drink that night, but we don't know, A, what Thelma did before the party, really, and we don't know what she did after the party either.
True.
Before the party, drinking-wise, I should say. We know what she did. She was with her mom, but, I mean, if she had a few cocktails and then has even more at dinner, there you have it, and if she goes out after that, there you have more drinking.
No, it's true. She was I don't know. I'm not prepared to say that she was a raging alcoholic, but she was known to be able to really put some liquor down. I don't know if you heard that or not.
Yeah, no, she could definitely hold her own when it came to the drinking department. I don't think I would say she was a raging alcoholic, but I would say she had an alcohol problem.
Yeah, there's probably some differences there. Now and then Hollywood, of course, as Hollywood did in that time, they swept this under the rug and tried desperately to keep it all a secret, didn't they?
Yeah, so Hollywood, of course, is sitting there. They're freaking out. I mean, Hollywood at this point is still kind of reeling over the fatty article scandal.
Yep.
Which is, 14 years before.
Mm-hmm.
But Hollywood is really under, a microscope right now, because this is also after, the Hays Code has been in effect for about a year at this point. So Hollywood is really oh, is this contributing to the moral decay of society? With a bunch of religious fundamentalists and stuff like that. So, or groups like that, I should say. So Hollywood is, they're trying to hide the fact that she's basically living with Roland, and that they have a really odd living situation because Roland's wife, Jewel Carmen, lives there part of the time or something too. I don't know. Her living situation is still completely unclear to me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Hollywood's freaking out about this.
Yeah, and they don't want to. They don't need any more scandals. And I've you were talking about Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle. When three of my favorite stars. The early stars were Arbuckle and Charlie Chaplin and Mabel Normand. And between the three of them, they were implicated in 4 murders and 2 rapes.
Yeah.
And it's like these are the people who are putting in such high, but at the same time, they're in Arbuckle's case, really, in all the cases, in most of the cases, there was really nothing happened, and then in the Thelma Todd's case, I think you're right. I think it's just one of those things where it's certainly not. It's certainly a deep tragedy, but it doesn't seem as if anyone would beat her up and then put her in a car and hope for the carbon monoxide one other thing about that, the accidental portion of it, is I'm wondering, is it possible in 1935 that a smart woman, because she was a smart woman, we haven't really talked about that, but Thelma Todd was smart, and by accounts that I've heard. And is it possible that a smart woman in 1935 doesn't know that it's dangerous to have a running car in a garage?
I think that the dangers of carbon monoxide poisoning are probably known at that point. You shouldn't keep your garage closed with a car, but she's drunk.
Right. You're not making the same right decision.
Yeah, drunk people make very poor decisions. That's why you see a lot of stories come out of Florida. Drunk people just... and I can say that because I lived in Florida for a very long time, so it's okay. I can make fun of Florida. But, I think that she's had too much to drink. She sits there. She probably also thought, too, that she would only be there for maybe an hour or two. And when you're drunk, I don't think you particularly think, oh, well, I won't be able to survive, my car being in a closed garage for 2 hours. But if you're drunk, you will probably think I can do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because when you get to a point where you're just sitting in your car, you are going to fall asleep. And how many hundreds of people through the years have been caught in their cars the next morning? I didn't know, but they were lucky because they were just in a parking lot.
Exactly. And they're able to get out. But I mean, and that's part of the reason too, though, that I don't think that she was particularly suicidal. Not downplaying suicide, of course. A lot of people who make that decision make it very quickly, but I don't think there's anything to suggest that that's what was going through her head. I really just think that Roland locked her out because he was mad, and she turned on the car to stay warm because she couldn't get in the house.
April, this is why I come to you, because you are making way too much sense. That's all, because I came into this recording not 100% convinced, but I was slightly convinced that she was murdered, and my thought was Roland West did it, or potentially his wife, but it was, I just kind of had this funny feeling it was Roland West, and now you got me pretty much where I'm almost 100% convinced that it was an accident, because I started thinking about, why would someone beat somebody up and then start the car like that? That doesn't make any sense. So you've kind of actually made me convinced that she did indeed, this was an accident. But let's bring it back around and talk about the films again, and just off the top of your head, what are a couple of really good moments, or a couple of good Thelma Todd films that you really enjoy that you would recommend to somebody to watch?
I really enjoy Hips Hips Hooray.
You know what?
I
I haven't seen that. That's a legendary pre-code film, and I haven't actually seen it.
Yeah, no, I mostly like it because I think it's hilarious. Just the name is just funny to me. Go figure. I have a very horrible sense of humor. Really, any of the shorts, I mean, I could sit here and name shorts for like a long time, and I'm not going to do that, but I would just say that I prefer actually the Patsy Kelly shorts to the Zazu Pitts
Oh,
shorts.
you do?
I do. Not because I think like they're bad or anything like that. I really like Patsy Kelly. One of my favorites in that one is actually Made in Hollywood, but Made is MAID.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah. I just saw that one. Yeah.
Yeah, so I really like that one. And I have a soft spot for Patsy Kelly because Patsy Kelly just followed no rules and did her own thing. So I quite like Patsy Kelly. But I do have to say, the Zazu Pitts are very, very good as well. Asleep in the Fleet is very, very well done too. But yeah, so any of the shorts and Hips Hips Hooray would be my main ones to recommend, and that would give somebody like 40 different things to watch.
Oh yeah, it's nearly endless, and I would echo your sentiments. I don't know if I have a preference between the two ladies, Patsy Kelly or Zazu Pitts. I feel like I don't know. I mean, they're certainly different from each other, and but I like both. But I don't know if I have a preference either way. But yeah, definitely watch some of those for the people listening. Watch those, and I would recommend. To me, one of the best scenes that Thelma Todd was ever in was with Groucho Marx in Monkey Business, and she was also in Horse Feathers, but I prefer Monkey Business by a little bit anyway. And there's just a hilarious scene where they're dancing and in the room, and she's married, and the husband comes in and he's a gangster. Have you seen that?
I have, and I quite enjoy it.
Oh my gosh! And Groucho says, "I got a fire engine for Christmas." When he's talking about the gun that the guy pulls out, or he's got a gun that he's pointing at him, and he says, "Oh, did you get that for Christmas? I got a fire engine." Yeah, the flirtation, and I will say it's also good in Horse Feathers too. But I just really like the scene where the guy comes in and he's married to Thelma Todd, and I would also recommend another one that's totally different than ones we've talked about, which is a movie called Whispering Whoopi. Have you ever seen that?
I have not seen that.
Do yourself a favor, watch it. It's got Charlie Chase, and a cast of characters that some of which you would know. And I'm trying to think of them off the top of my head, but I can't. But it's just a fun film. Lots of good, mild slapstick. You don't have to, if you don't have to be 7 years old to enjoy it. You can really enjoy the slapstick humor and Whispering Whoopi. Charlie Chase plays a guy that's just absolutely horrified because these people are having a little too much fun in his apartment, and the landlord comes and they throw water on the landlord. It's just hilarious. Yeah, you got to watch Whispering Whoopi. So write that down to everybody. And now, last question, April. Well, before I ask that, is there anything else you'd like to add to that we didn't? I didn't want to cut you off at all.
No, you're fine. I would just say the main thing is to try to enjoy Thelma for her film work and don't focus like so much on her death. It's really sad to me. Not you, obviously, like people who are listening. But it's really sad to me that, you know, she did definitely leave her mark on films, and her death has really overshadowed that. So that's my main like thing whenever I talk about Thelma.
Yeah, and so far on the time ticker, I've got 54 minutes, and I'm pretty sure about 42 of them were dedicated to Thelma Todd, the person or the movies.
Most definitely.
I like it.
I like working with you.
I like it, and yeah, I mean you could call it fun or not fun or whatever, talking about the tragedies, but you know, I like to set everything aside. Even if someone is, to me, like, even if someone's a horrible SOB, it doesn't mean that I can't watch their films and enjoy them, you know, especially if they've been gone for 7 decades or 8 decades. And, you know, so, but I don't think, you know, I think Thelma is one of those people that, you know, she obviously got involved in a situation that was bad, and but yeah, she had so much range and over 100 films to choose from. A good portion of them are available on YouTube if you care to watch them. You don't have to actually purchase them. But now the last question I have is, do you think that that Thelma Todd, had she lived a lot longer, would she have had a Joan Blondell kind of career? Would she have been able to be in a film 50 years later, and some of the old people in the audience knew who she was? And you know, what do you think?
You know, I'd like to think she could have, but if I'm realistically looking at it, I don't think she probably would have.
Mm-hmm.
Not because she didn't have the talent or the screen presence or anything like that, but Joan was somebody who did lead major movies and everything, but most of the comedy, you know, shorts you see from the 30s, a lot of them aren't able to keep going. There are obviously exceptions to that, but like, look at Oliver and Hardy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah, Laurel and Hardy.
Jesus. But you know what I mean. Look at Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah. Now, yeah, they I know what you mean. It is a difficult jump, just like a lot of people had difficulty jumping from the silent films to the sound films, and you know, it's a difficult task. Anytime you change the whole complexion of what films are about, and you know, it had to have been a difficult task for a lot of directors and actors to make the jump from pre-code to Hays Code films. I feel like that making a film that cuts that makes the Hays Code cut, that means that you have to not be too wild, or you know, not too much sexual innuendo, and you know, not enough violence, or not too much violence. And you know, you saw a guy like James Cagney be able to make the leap from a pre-code hero to to a Hays Code hero. I mean, there really aren't that many stories if you really look at it, though. Most of those pre-code film stars, the real big ones, most of the pre-code ones, they didn't make that jump. We always think of the silent to sound, but it's also the pre-code to Hays Code films. Some of the actors had difficulty doing that, and
exactly, a lot of the directors had an issue with it too.
Yeah,
you know, and really, there's a really horrible transition too when they get rid of the Hays Code. Like, Billy Wilder just really can't do it after the Hays Code is abolished. So, and I love Billy Wilder, and this doesn't mean he didn't keep working, because he did keep working, but he can't keep up with it. And you know, I think that's a great point to bring up, David, is that there's multiple transitions in films where people just aren't able to make the transition. So, great observation.
Yeah, and I enjoy the part where you just mentioned Billy Wilder, because he was like a pioneer to get away from the Hays Code, would make Some Like It Hot and the Apartment, which really were extremely edgy films, and they really did not honor the code. But yet, when the code is lifted, his films seemed more tame. And yeah, you're right. I mean, he did better when he was the edgy person, and then when he was no longer edgy, he didn't. It's kind of like the trains off the track kind of thing.
Exactly, and I don't think a whole lot of people knew what to do with all of it, because they're like, oh, I can do anything I want. And then, of course, we get into the 70s, which the 70s has some really great movies, and it has some really horrible movies.
Right.
I remember one time I hadn't seen Caligula, the unedited version, like the full version.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this guy over, and we were kind of seeing each other. I said, let's watch Caligula. And it was the director's cut. And of course, I didn't know the story about it. So I open up, and I put it on, and within 3 minutes, it's like a porno. And I'm just like, what is this?
Yeah, I've heard legendary stories about that. Matter of fact, I know the actors were the A-list actors that were in it were duped, and they played in the film, and then all of a sudden they had X-rated actors come in and do the hardcore stuff, and it's like we had people like John Gielgud in it, and Malcolm McDowell, Helen Mirren. Yeah, I mean, they were all duped. And, I don't think any of them would have been in it had they known.
It's funny you say that, because Malcolm McDowell, I just heard him on Gilbert Gottfried's podcast not too long ago.
Yeah, that's right.
And he's just like, he's still open and talking about it. I mean, I'll give him credit for that. But yeah, you're right. They had all the Penthouse pets come in and do the hardcore scenes. And when I say like hardcore scenes, they are actual hardcore scenes.
Oh boy.
It's nothing that's like maybe it is, maybe it isn't. No, like it definitely is. You know it's bad when Gore Vidal separates himself from it.
Oh dear. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I don't know how we got to Caligula, but that's kind of funny.
That's definitely on me.
No, I don't know how we got there. How do we start talking about it? But yeah, we were talking about pre-code and yeah, I mean you're absolutely right. Some of the films in the 70s were vulgar just to be vulgar. And it's just like it doesn't you don't need to put that in there.
Well, and that's my thing with it. I'm just like, there is an art to films, and the 70s definitely proved that there is an art to films.
Yeah. Well, I wish that Thelma Todd would have made it into the 70s, and we wouldn't know the answer to our question. I don't think she would have been in Caligula, though. That's just my opinion.
That might have been interesting.
I don't think he would. I don't think she would have been young enough to be one of his mistresses or whatever.
Never say never, David. We don't know.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So Thelma Todd was born in 1906. Died in 1935, and unfortunately, she's kind of gone to an area where people just don't recognize her as a great film star, but in fact, like April, you said, over 100 film credits. And so, April, I apologize for not doing this in the beginning, but please tell me, you are involved in another podcast right now.
I am. I feel like I'm cheating on you, David. I feel horrible. But no, so yeah, it's called the Aardvark Cinecast, but it's new movies, and it's movies that are available to be streamed on the major streaming sites. So yeah, it's a fun project. Totally different than what I'm used to doing, though.
Yep, and you've been kind enough to extend a guest spot for me in the oncoming months, so I'm looking forward to coming on to your show. Anything else you want to promote right now?
No, that's pretty much it. But as always, thank you for having me, David. I look forward to having you on mine as well.
Okay, and I'm gonna lock you into a couple more of mine. So
Hey, you know what? I'm always happy to talk to you.
great, April. Well, thank you very, very, very much.
Thank you so much for having me, David. It's been great.
All right, take care. So that is April VeVea, and we are always so glad to have April come on the show. And it is really something to be able to talk with her. As I've said before, she's a fountain of knowledge, and I really appreciate her. Well, this is Cinema Chat, and my name is David Heath, and I am just a simple, humble host of the show. And thank you for listening.